Hello, I'm Don Monk, Director of Vineyard Operations for Hall Wines in Napa Valley. And we're standing in our Sacre vineyard, which is our flagship vineyard. It's the first vineyard that the Halls purchased in the late 90s. And this is kind of where it all began, the Kathryn Hall wine. We're at an elevation of about 750 feet and directly west of Lake Hennessy, approximately a quarter mile. The vineyard is approximately 33 acres planted, mostly Cabernet, a little bit of Cabernet Franc and Petit Verdot. So this is a very special vineyard to us. It is the vineyard that we have produced 2 100-point wines from. As with all of our estate vineyards, it gets a lot of attention to detail on the farming. We are constantly manicuring the vines as needed, controlling vigor to optimize fruit quality, to bring out the most intense flavors in the grapes. I think between the soils and the elevation are the 2 key characteristics of this vineyard. And year in and year out, it is the core of our Kathryn Hall wine.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kathryn Hall, and welcome. Very strong and heartfelt welcome to all of you, our trade partners, those of you who represent us in markets across the country, to people we haven't or will not often even have a chance to meet. So it's really great that you have joined us today. Very special welcome to our trade partners who are retailers. Many of you have been with us for many years, but many of you are also very new to us. So it's been great to meet some of you, and we look forward to getting to see all of you now that we can travel more again. And to our restaurant partners, thank you. You have been through so much in the last couple of years, and we are proud to be part of your lists, and very, very happy, as we know you are, to see that so many of your guests are coming back and that your industry has made it through, and we are right there with you and very proud to do so. I'm going to be joined today by our Vice President of Winemaking, Megan Gunderson, who has been with us now for 17 years, which I can hardly believe as I now say it. So Megan began her career back in 2001. She worked at Robert Mondavi and at Domino's and at Saint-Supéry, and then joined us, luckily, back in 2005. In her role as Vice President of Winemaking, she is responsible for everything that goes in every bottle of wine we produce, from the vineyard to the final bottling for our Walt, our Hall, and our Baca wines. So it is really great to have you here. Megan, are you there? And there she is. Hey, and she is there. Lucky you, you're at the Bergfeld building, I see.
Yes, hello, good morning, good afternoon, I guess, it's noon.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm in the historic Peterson Bergfeld building, which is the original winery on this site here in St. Helena, where our new modern winemaking facility sits right behind me. But this is built in 1885, and it was one of the original gravity flow wineries in the Napa Valley.
Yeah. Our industry has come a long way since then. Yeah.
It certainly has.
Right, really. And I'm really proud that we have been really on the forefront of the technological advances that come in the wine. So every time I'm at the Bergfeld, I think about the importance of the heritage of our industry and our winemaking traditions, but also what we can do to refine and be more specific in how you and your team deal with the wines. So Megan and I are talking about the 2019 Kathryn Hall Cabernet, Remember to check us in the Q&A section if you want to ask some questions, and we hope you will. It's at the bottom of your screen. And so we will pick those up as we go along, and we will be taking questions. Well, actually, Megan will be taking most of the questions, but I'll be here too. And I'll just start by saying, for me, the Kathryn Hall wine is very special for so many reasons. Certainly because of the name. I'm proud of every wine that we make, and there is, for me, a special pride that goes into the Kathryn Hall, my namesake wine and our flagship wine. But I also am so proud of the vineyard that we have. I knew it would be a great vineyard for us, but I don't think any of us had any idea how wonderful the wines that we could produce off of this vineyard could be. And when I look at that great film, the short video that those of you who turned on at the very beginning saw that Don Monk made, you saw shots of that beautiful vineyard and view, which is what I wake up to every morning. I live on that vineyard, and it is very special to me for that reason as well. I think, as many of you know who I have visited with, the winemaking tradition and the vineyard viticulture part of our business is very special to me. My father was a farmer. I grew up watching him work in the vineyards, and although he never had the opportunity to make wines from as great a quality of vineyard as we do at Hall, at Walt and Baca, he had the same degree of pride that I think we bring to every wine that we make. And so it is wonderful to watch Don walk us through that vineyard and to just talk about that care, because it's a very intensive, and I would say, labor of love that goes into this vineyard at Sacre, but really every vineyard that we have. So Megan, I'm thinking that you are going to start telling us a bit about the wines or whatever. Let me turn this to you.
Okay. Yeah, so as Kathryn said, I've been with the winery for a very long time and have been inspired for almost 20 years by Kathryn and Craig's vision of the kind of Cabernet that they wanted to produce in the Napa Valley. And starting with the Sacre vineyard, first and foremost, we've always been stewards of the land. We've always farmed sustainably or organically in all of our estate vineyards. If we have a grower partner, we are looking for vineyard owners who also are farming sustainably, with a focus towards being responsible for, the land that we've been tasked with taking care of, this very special paradise, Napa Valley. And so over the course of several years, we have implemented new viticulture techniques. Our winemaking team and our vineyard team work very closely together to make sure that we're producing the very finest Cabernet Merlot possible. And Sacre, as Don mentioned in the video at the opening of this segment, is at 750 feet in elevation. It's a small vineyard. It's exclusive. It's really the crown jewel in our vineyard holdings. So the light volcanic, they're called tuff soils, really drive the vines to be small and produce small clusters, which translates to very concentrated and intense Cabernet. So if you watch that video, you saw Don walking the rows, and you could see that there's shade cloth on the vines, and that is a recent development, a new application for us. And what that does is really protects the cluster throughout the ripening season, and make sure that we have the right mix of tannin in the finished wine. So that's something very interesting that we're doing. We have a very modern, LEED certified, so environmentally friendly, responsible winery here in St. Helena that I mentioned before is just right behind me. It sits right next to this historic Peterson Bergfeld building. And it's set up so that we have many, many small fermentation tanks. So we can keep vineyards separate, we can keep vineyard blocks separate. And that's really important because that allows us to coax the very best that we can from each one of these individual lots of wine and what become blending components for Kathryn Hall. We were one of the early adopters of optical sorting technology. We started using an optical sorter in 2010. So we've been using it for about 13 vintages now. And what that does is it allows us to be more precise in our sorting. So we get very pure, very clean fruit. We load that fruit into the tank using gravity, so very gentle handling techniques, very careful, thoughtful fermentation, barrel aging, and ultimately, if we've done the work in the vineyard throughout the winemaking process and aging, we are able to bottle our wines without fining or filtration. So one of our hallmarks is a very supple, silky mid-palate texture, especially on the Kathryn Hall. That is a hallmark of our Kathryn Hall Cabernet. And that is how we achieve that. It's through a lot of work, very, very diligent, but it's attention to detail at every level. And we're passionate about increasing that quality with every vintage. Every vintage is an opportunity to do better. So there's some background on winemaking. Shall I talk about the 2019 vintage now, Kathryn?
Well, I think so. I've got my glass ready and I'm ready to go.
All right.
So everybody, I hope you have a glass of wine handy.
So the 2019 vintage in the Napa Valley was really exceptional. It was a vintage, I think, that is going to go down as one of the best vintages of the past decade. We had ample rainfall in the winter. We had a very long, even growing season. Yields were normal. They weren't too high. They weren't too low. That means that the vines in general were balanced and happy. We had a couple of heat spikes in October that, you know, didn't cause panic, but I think what it did was get us over the finish line, got the fruit fully, perfectly ripe, and sort of punctuated the 2019 vintage. You guys might hear the wine train in the background right now. The wine train is coming up the valley and blowing the horn, so I apologize for that. But really dense wines, very age-worthy wines, elevated acidity, which I like. It brings a freshness and a pop to the tannin and the fruit and the overall feel of the wine. And I think that as we taste this 2019 vintage of Kathryn Hall, it's got the characteristic dark fruit, black fruit earth that comes from the Sacrochet vineyard. When we're putting this blend together, Sacrochet is always taking center stage. We always start with a base of Sacrochet and then move on to other high elevation hillside sites that are complementary to that tannin structure. Oftentimes we'll be blending Diamond Mountain fruit from Atlas Peak. It just depends on the vintage. This particular version of Kathryn Hall is about 95% Cabernet Sauvignon, 4% Merlot, and 1% Cabernet Franc. So we were working to round out the tannin structure, with the Merlot and the Cab Franc. And I'm really very excited about this wine. I think it's so beautiful, and it's just a great vintage of Kathryn Hall.
You know, Megan, I mean, every year that we make this wine, that you make this wine, it always has these beautiful silky tannins. I mean, there's just the texture on this is just as wonderful as ever. You know, it's just like year after year, there's a silkiness to the texture of the Kathryn Hall.
Yeah, that's the hallmark. That's the #1 descriptor. That's what we're looking for when we're putting this blend together. It's always been a part of this wine, and we work vintage after vintage to recreate that. if you will, while honoring the vintage, the uniqueness of the vintage at the same time.
Yeah,
Shall we turn it over for some questions?
I think so. Yeah. Can you see the questions there? I don't have any here.
I can't.
But
Would you like me to read them?
yeah, please do.
Okay.
It's great.
All right. Oh, so here's a good one. So when you decided you were going to make wine, Kathryn, why did you choose the Napa Valley?
Oh my gosh, if you want to make Cabernet, that was so easy. That was the easiest of any of the decisions because I think I mentioned earlier that I wanted to do hillside Cabernet, but I wanted to make Cabernet, a great Cabernet. And there is really only one place to do that in California, and that's the Napa Valley. I mean, I just, the variety of the soils and the variety of the temperature and all the different choices that one can make within the valley are special, but all of them, just about every appellation area of the valley is really very special. Although I have to say that we landed where we did for very good reason. I really just love the wines that this particular vineyard produces.
Yeah, having worked with so many other vineyards throughout the Napa Valley over the course of my career here, there's nothing really that compares to, I mean, the beauty of the site. I mean, it's just stunning. That unique combination of soil, how it interacts with the vine and the resulting wine. It's power, it's earth, it's chocolate, and it's every year, you know, that's what the vineyard gives. And it's so fun to see it year after year. So you and Craig made a very good choice.
You know, I actually remember when we first got the vineyard, it had a beautiful provenance already. There were some lovely wines that were being made from the Sacochet fruit even then, which was now back very long time ago. But there was this, we wanted to change the blocks and some of the watering system and some of the rootstocks and just to sort of, and to change the spacing on the vineyard so that we could have a tighter spacing. The original spacing was that very old-fashioned spacing that my father used to do and all the old guys used to do, you know, many, many years ago. It's like, I think it was 10 by 10 that long ago. And so we knew from research that, you know, at UC Davis and other places, that if you have tighter spacing, you can improve the quality and the density and various other characteristics of the wine. So we changed the spacing. We changed some of the way we flow the water through the vineyard. And I remember talking to the fellow who was working with us at that time about, you know, so there's this wine, and we use all these very fancy technology, this infrared stuff and the aerial pictures and so forth. And I told him, now this is where we're going to do, and this is what we need to do in these little areas. And then he said, well, I know that, you know, he just knew it from working the vineyard. He didn't need all that technology to tell him, you know, so fun.
Yeah, well, you made some great decisions, and it's a stellar vineyard site.
Yeah, it really, really is. Oh gosh, I think we've got some more. I see some questions in here.
We do. We have some more questions. So we have a question about our barrel program. So what barrels are we using? How long are we aging the wines? So we have spent a lot of time over the years doing what we call Cooper trials. So Cooper is a company that makes a specific type of barrel, and really only working with French oak barrels, but several different barrel makers, if you will. And we'll fill to all these different barrels, and we'll taste throughout the aging process and see, you know, the different characteristics of each barrel and how it's interacting with different vineyard sites. And specifically for Sacochet, it's all about reining in that powerful tannin, right? We want it to have a presence, but we want it to be refined. And so it was looking for those barrels that would not hide the character of the Sacre or any of the other vineyards. You know, we always want the vineyard to shine, but we needed a barrel that would bring some length and some natural sweetness to the finish to help round out that very powerful tannin. And after many, many years, we decided that the Terenceau barrel is the best fit for the Sacre in particular. It's very old cooperage. It's in Cognac and French oak. And these barrels are, for me, some of the very best barrels that you can buy. And so that's what we use for Sacre and mostly for Kathryn Hall. Everything that goes into the Kathryn Hall largely sees Terenceau. And we're usually at about 75% new French oak. And we age for about 26 months before bottling.
You know, folks might be interested to know that we tried over the years to use barrels from other areas. We tried Hungarian barrels, you know, because they are less expensive, really, to see if there was a more efficient way to make wine. But there, at the end of the day, there really isn't anything that I think Megan you like as much as the French barrel.
Not yet, but you know, we're very much into exploring new things, trying different techniques. We're not recipe-driven winemakers, so we will keep trying what's out there. And yes, we tried Hungarian, we tried American, and it just doesn't work for what we're trying to do. It works well for other producers, but not for us. All right.
You know, I saw another question in there. I'm just going to jump ahead on it because I love this question and I would love to hear you speak to it. Will you compare the 2018 to the 2019? Because I'm one of those who just loves the 2018 and I love the 2019 as well. So I'd love to hear you talk about it.
Of course. So 2018 and 2019 were the two least challenging vintages of the past decade. More often, the vintages that we have, we're facing challenges. More often than not, they're challenging. They push us. They push us in our winemaking and how we're making wines. It's never easy here in the Napa Valley, but that's why we do it. But 2018, again, ample rain in the winter, a very good, very extended, long growing season. Yields were up in 2018. So the vines, after 3 years of having very little water, they had quite a bit of water in the winter, and they just, you know, they were very active, big canopies, very fruitful. And so you had to do the work in 2018 to thin the vine, to get the right balance between the canopy and the fruit. And then we could take advantage of that really long growing season. It was so easy. It was like, well, you know, this is not quite ready yet, so I'm going to leave it out there another few days and taste it, you know, a few more times. There was no pressure to pick. You know, we could roll things through the winery, give everything perfect tank residence time, and that's not always the case. So 2018 was great. Very easy to extract in 2018, which is the sign of a good vintage. I think 2018 was more approachable in its youth. So very fleshy, very fruit forward, effusive wines. And when I compare that to the 2019, we talked about those small heat spikes at the end of harvest and the slightly higher acidity, which brings a freshness to the 2019. I think that the 2019 is just going to take a little bit longer to round out. It's still very fleshy and very beautiful, but for me, a little bit more focused, if you will, focused and serious. So, and I see that across the board in all the wines, but in particular, the 2018 versus 2019 Kathryn Hall Cabernet.
So I see a question here from, I'm just jumping ahead with these questions because these are great. And by the way, remember again, if you want to ask some questions, just add them to the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. So Ben Silver asked you, Megan, what bricks did you pick at? And I'm assuming he's talking about the 2019.
Yeah, so in 2019, we were anywhere between, for this one in particular, I would say 25.5 to 27 or 27.5. And what got us up to 27 was that those small heat events towards the end of harvest. And so that was really the bricks range for this particular blend in 2019.
Yeah. So here's a question to both of us, Megan, and I'll answer first, and then I'm very curious to hear what you say. We were asked, and let me see who this is, who asked us this. Katie Hayes asked us, besides the Kathryn Hall Cabernet, what is your favorite wine in the portfolio? And I'll just say, for me, I will stick with the Sacrochet grapes. I mean, I love all of our wines. There's not any wine that we make that I don't love. But my other favorites would be either the Excellence, which comes off of the Sacrochet vineyard, or the certain rows of the Excellence of the Sacrochet vineyard going to Excellence. And then the other one I just love is one of our platinum wines. They're sadly not wines that you all can sell because we only make the platinum wines in very, very small quantities, but we make a platinum wine called the Sacrochet that is absolutely superb and has all these wonderful qualities that Megan's been talking about, but I would just say on steroids.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a good description.
Yeah.
You know, for me, obviously, Sacrochet is the vineyard that I've been working with the longest in my career, so it's definitely got a special place in my heart as well. And I love the structure of those wines that we make from that vineyard, but I also am really drawn to Diamond Mountain. I love our Diamond Mountain Appellation wine. I love that it's not overly fruity. It's coffee, it's chocolate. You get some really interesting notes like black olive tapenade, aroma and flavor profile. And so I really love working with the vineyards that we source from on Diamond Mountain and the resulting wines. It's really a fun appellation to work with.
So this is from someone who doesn't want us to say his name or her name. And this is a question that they say, will you address the 2020 vintage? And how does the 2022 look?
Certainly. So as I said, the vintages usually are not without challenges, and 2020 was challenging for many reasons, but I think that our greatest strength, Hall Wines, is that we tend to shine in difficult vintages. So because of the diversity in our vineyard sourcing, we source fruit from 14 of the 16 nested AVAs throughout Napa, and that's pretty rare. I mean, so we have a very broad spectrum of vineyards at varying elevations, different ripening windows. And so we're very fortunate to not have all of our eggs in one basket when extremely difficult vintages come along. And for us in 2020, we had the opportunity to harvest mostly everything and make wine and really learn a lot from the 2020 vintage. We will make very little wine in 2020. We have a reduced number of bottlings, and certainly case production is down, but what is going into bottle is exceptional. 2020 was a great vintage up until we had the fires throughout Napa Valley, really all along the West Coast. So I embrace vintages like that. I mean, I don't ever want to see a vintage like that again, but those really difficult vintages are the ones in which I'm proud to say that we do shine. So now 2022 is, I think, shaping up to be a lot like 2015 for me. It's average to slightly lower yields. We had a lot of frost. We had to do a lot of frost protection in 2022, just like we did in 2015. The wines are very dense and very concentrated, really easy to extract, which, as I said earlier, for me is a mark of a great vintage. And so what I'm seeing across the board are very dark, very fruit forward wines with incredibly supple tannins. So I'm super excited about the 2022 vintage across the board. It was very condensed. Everything wanted to come in at the same time, which we say is going to happen every year. And we're like, oh, everything's going to come at the same time. Well, this year it actually did. Everything wanted to come in at the same time. So it was about getting things through fermentation and logistics, and it was that kind of vintage, but really a lot of fun and some phenomenal wines from 2022.
I'm sorry everybody can't be here during the harvest and just really get a feel for the long hours and the hard work that you and your team all put in. I mean, it's just basically everybody pretty much says goodbye to their families for a couple months. And and so Megan looks very calm here, but it was.
Well, we started on August 19th. We ended on October 21st. And I think, amongst the winemaking team, the cellar team, we had, I don't know, I had maybe 3 days off during that time. So everyone's a little bit tired, but we have a great crew. We have a very experienced vineyard team, very experienced winemaking team. And our cellar team has been here for several years. They know how to make the wines. They know it's hard work, but they just fully embrace it. So we're very fortunate to have such a dedicated production team here.
And you're an incredible leader of your team that everybody really enjoys working for you and with you.
Thank you.
We have another question from Robert Huntley, who has asked, which of our sustainability practices are you most proud of? And I'll jump in before passing this over to Megan, just to say that I'm very proud of everything that we do in sustainability, because it's nothing about that process is inexpensive. It is always done out of a commitment to do things that are respectful of the land and the long-term viability of the land, and really just to be a responsible citizen. So I just think that everything you and your team are doing is just really extraordinary.
Thank you. For me, on the vineyard side, I would say it's how we approach, whether it be vineyard development or farming. We're always considering the environment first. We're considering what we can do to have as little impact on the land as possible. So in the vineyard, it's reducing how much we're tilling, encouraging cover crops that will both benefit the vine and then the natural flora and fauna that should be in that vineyard, not spraying chemicals that will harm that very delicate ecosystem, installing owl boxes. So we have owls as a natural predator for gophers, which will go after the roots of young vines. And it's things like that have always been very important to us, that we've always been doing since I started working here. And you hear more and more about it now, but we were really early adopters of that. And then I think throughout the winemaking process, it's capturing our wastewater and treating it and then reusing it. Really trying to reduce the amount of carbon that we're putting back into the environment. And just thinking about how we can do better, always, how can we do better? You know, recently a opportunity came up to recycle our wine bottles. So for consumers to be able to send the bottles back to us potentially so that we could help them recycle the bottles. So it's getting winemaking products locally rather than shipping them from very far away. Obviously, French oak barrels are an exception, but things like glass and capsules and all of the things that go into winemaking, we want for that to come from as close to home as possible. Always exploring new opportunities to do it better and with an eye on protecting a very fragile environment, especially here in Napa Valley. Okay.
Eduardo Oliveros has asked us, what was our total production for the 2019 vintage? My 2 cents before you tell us the answer is not enough. We always run out of this wine.
Yeah, so in 2019, we were able to make about 5,500 cases. So still very limited production. And 2019 was close to average yields, as you remember. So 2020 is going to be much smaller than that. 2021 yields were down, and 2022 is a light vintage as well. So it's good for us to have as many cases as we do of the 2019.
We have another question, and someone let us know if we're running out of time or running over, but I will just, let me put this one up. This is from Stephen Jones, who has said, are you concerned with the rising climate temperature? And are you looking at alternative clones or grapes that are better suited to higher temperature during growth?
That's a great question. Absolutely, we're concerned about it. You know, we spend a lot of time as grape growers and winemakers studying the weather, studying the change in environment, looking at what's going on in the world. And I think in terms of temperature rising, it's really quite slow. There are extremes. The extremes are becoming more apparent, but the average annual temperature is not rising at a very rapid rate in Napa Valley. I think the concerns for us are limited water. So we need to have a year with very good rainfall so that we can replenish the soils, so that we can replenish our reservoirs. There's nothing we can do about that, but you know, ask the rain gods to give us some rain. So we're always hopeful for more rain. And then in viticulture, you see a lot of changes in the way that we're farming in Napa. So installing cross arms, larger canopies, more shading on the vine, protecting the fruit, heat suppression systems. There are misting systems that go into vineyards that can cool down the canopy and the fruit when it gets very warm. And everyone is doing this. You know, we are absolutely reacting to it. It's not going to be applicable in all vintages, but certainly for the warmer vintages, we're going to be ready to continue to produce the very finest Cabernet Sauvignon. Napa Valley is still the best place in California for Cabernet.
Well, Megan, I think that we probably have kept everybody about long enough. I will say again to everybody, thank you so much for being our partners, and please come visit us out here in Napa, and we will definitely be there to see you, all of us, Megan and I and our reps that in each of our regions, and Jeff Zappelli, and anyway, we all look forward to seeing you on the road. Megan?
I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. for asking such great questions. And as Kathryn said, for being such fantastic partners. We really appreciate all of the work that you do. So thank you very much.
Well, to everybody, I hope you can put us both on the screen here, but let's see. I'll say to everybody, thank you everyone so much. And if it looks like we can't, so you get to, here's a cheers for me. Now,
and here's a cheers from me.
Bye-bye, everybody.